Okay, meeting is called to order. This is the June 20th, 2025 board meeting of the Board of Voter Registration and Elections of Beaufort County. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, first on the agenda is the public comments section. Public comments section. Seeing no public present, we'll move on to the next topic, which is the meetings of the board meeting on May 28th, 2025. Do I have a motion to accept the meeting minutes?
Arlene Mitchell moves that the meetings from May 28th, 2025 be accepted with any necessary changes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Sawicki? Okay, and as for comments, I have just one comment, minor comment in the legislative affairs section. I'd like to either strike or correct the bullet that said S36 resolution is out. What was discussed was a resolution for S36 that was not yet prepared but would be prepared in the future. So since it's mentioned in this first draft, I'd like to just propose that the bullet be revised to resolution regarding S36 to be prepared in the future. Other than that, I have no comments on these meeting minutes. Does anyone else have comments?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor of accepting these meeting minutes, including the change that I suggested? Say all in favor. Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Okay, thank you. So we'll move into committee reports, starting with the Budget and Finance Committee with Mr. Backer.
No formal report. We did not meet in June. Our plan will be to meet probably mid-July, since the fiscal year 26 budget has been approved. So we'll review fiscal year 25 results and the 26 budget that was approved by County Council.
Okay, thank you. Facilities, Mr. Ford?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no formal report from the Facilities Committee. However, there are some capital improvement projects that the Facility Committee will be working with staff on, as well as the identification for additional precincts for voting. Facility Committee will be meeting with staff on those projects as well. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ford. For Legislative Affairs, there is no report. How about redistricting? Ms. Dorr?
There's no report at this time.
No report. Okay. And Ms. Johnson, how about rules?
There's no report at this time. I have received charters from all of the committees, so I'm hoping to schedule a meeting in July and finalize the operations manual.
So do you think that by the July meeting, we'll have a revised draft to review? Or are we looking at August?
That is my hope.
July is the plan,
Yes.
the target. Okay, great. Next is the Early Voting Center Evaluation or Ad Hoc Committee. Mr. Sawicki?
Yes, our committee analyzed a lot of data that was supplied by the Beaufort Elections Office, and basically, in conclusion, the committee findings recommend that additional equipment and human resources be allocated to reduce voter wait times to an acceptable minutes. Additionally, other strategic initiatives can be implemented depending on the location and the circumstances. So what we basically did is analyze all the equipment in each facility, and by adding additional equipment and staff, we came up with pretty close to matching all the required voters that showed up at each location. So I think that you know, the committee did a good job, and I think we have a solution without having to go look for a fifth site. And if you look in your board packet, there's all the information, all the detailed background of what we did. Sorry it's so small, but.
Sorry. Thanks, Mr. Swick. Yeah, I do have a question about the table that shows current voting equipment and proposed voting equipment. It looks like in the busiest early voting centers, Bluffton and Hilton Head, there's an increase of about 40% for BMDs. And since throughput has been constrained by the BMDs, it makes sense to be adding more BMDs. But the 40% increase, what's the basis of that recommendation?
That was, well, we had timed each operation. So we took the maximum you could spend at a BMD, which is 5 minutes, and what we did, we used that as a basis point for increasing voters. So if we could increase the equipment, you obviously increase voters, which with the other times we set should go through the process fairly quickly, which would cover basically a reduction in the time it takes for people waiting in line.
And can all of the facilities accommodate the additional equipment that's recommended
Yes, we
here?
went through every facility, and we all have enough room, enough power, and enough storage space for the equipment.
Great. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Sawicki? In that case, I'd like to make a motion that the board recognize the recommendation by the ad hoc EVC committee. And I'd like to take a vote to show our support for these recommendations. Yeah. Okay. Motion made and seconded. Any comments? Okay, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, thank you. Okay. Unfinished business. I have a comment for unfinished business regarding, this is attachment B from the May 28th board meeting. This is the precinct compliance report format that was proposed by staff during the director's report. Do y'all remember this? This is a table that lists every precinct number, precinct name, the polling location, name of the polling location, the address, voter registration totals, whether this precinct is compliant with the requirement for 1,500 or less voters, whether the polling location is included in the precinct, and whether the polling location meets ADA requirements. So I think that this is a great report. I did have some comments. I appreciate that the staff prepared this, and also the participation of the facilities committee for this report. I think our board has made very good progress in compliance with certain code of law requirements over the last 3 years, specifically 77710, which calls for no more than 1,500 voters in each precinct. And with the latest split of 8 precincts, we are 100% in compliance with this 77710 code of law section. We've also been paying greater attention to 77910, which stipulates voters must vote within a precinct of their residence. And note that there's only a couple of counties in South Carolina that are in full compliance with that section. We as a board have on 2 occasions asked the legislative delegation to consider local legislation that would allow the delegation to approve any non-compliances with 77910 on a case-by-case basis when there are no suitable polling locations. One example where such allowance is needed is Sun City. So that's a purely residential community with 10 precincts, but suitable polling locations in only 2 of those 10 precincts. In such a case, we definitely need to pool polling precincts in a polling location. The precedent that we pointed to in our board's July 23rd, 2023 letter, and also the March 13, 2025 letter to the delegation, is Richland County's local legislation 77465. That section describes how their delegation may approve pooled polling locations if a suitable location is not available, and if the polling place is within 5 miles of that precinct. So keeping our request to the delegation in mind, I reviewed this draft precinct compliance report from the perspective of an approver, such as this board or the legislative delegation. And I'd like to make 2 additions to this table. The additions are simply adding 2 columns to help the reviewer who does not have a first-hand knowledge of the precincts to understand what's being presented. The first column added would be a count of the number of precincts away. In other words, is the polling place in the adjacent precinct, or is it 2 precincts away or 3 precincts away? The second column would be a simple yes or no entry about whether or not the precinct boundary is more than 5 miles away from the polling location. And again, that ties back directly to the Richland's local legislation, which expressly says a pooled polling place shall be no more than 5 miles from the border of the precinct. So with the addition of those 2 columns, I'd like to make a motion that we accept this report as an annual report to be prepared by staff and presented to the board for approval annually, and if and when we can get the delegation to approve or to put some local legislation in place similar to Richland County's, they will be referring to this for their approval.
Mr. Chair, can you explain again what the values of those 2 additional columns, what will that do in terms of the report?
Well, the precedent local legislation that we've referred to the delegation is Richland's, and it expressly says that any pooled polling location will be no more than 5 miles away from the border of the precinct that's in that pooled location. So 5 miles is kind of the standard for that legislation. So the additions would show on this table for an approver who is not intimately familiar with each location. It would simply say, is this polling location within 5 miles of the pooled polling location? Yes or no?
So is the 5 miles, is that statute, or is that just something that was done
County.
in that particular county?
Well, Richland County is the only local legislation that has the right of the legislative delegation to approve pooled polling locations. And we, Beaufort County, in the 2 letters that we sent to our legislative delegation, we referred to that as precedent,
Right, precedents.
as a precedence, yes.
Again, so it's not statute, it's just that this is what has been done in another county.
Established.
And we think that it's wise to emulate that in Beaufort County.
Yes, you could say that.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, what was that first column that you would recommend adding?
Oh, the first column is
Count.
how many precincts away is the polling location? So is the polling location in the immediately adjacent precinct, or is it 2 precincts away or 3 precincts away?
So your
So it's really
wording
2
was
units of
count the
measure.
number of, I
Of-
think you said count the number of
Precincts
precincts.
away.
Precincts away.
So from the study that we did last year for the general election, I believe that every pooled precinct polling location was immediately adjacent to the precinct where the polling location is, with the exception of Sun City, where we have 10 precincts voting in 2 locations.
Mr. Chair, I would like to just insert, I'm not sure if it's going to make a difference, but what happened if the polling the adjacent polling location or the nearest polling location is 6 miles away, because from one border to the next, it could be outside the 5 miles. If you have a circumference, and if my polling location is not in the center, there's a possibility that the adjoining polling location for a voter that's on one spectrum of the circumference would be more than 5 miles away.
So the measure of 5 miles is from the polling location to the closest border of a precinct that's pooled in that location. Are we on the same page there? It's not,
No,
it's
it's not about the voter, then it's about the polling location itself.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the polling location is less than 5 miles to the nearest border of the precinct that's voting in that location, as the crow flies.
Behoove us to say approximately 5 miles or less. Would that give us a little bit of flexibility?
I suppose that we could do that,
So it won't be so rigid, you know,
yes.
in the event that we come up with some that's maybe 6 or 7.
Well, that language is not part of the motion that I've made, but when we present this again to the delegation to request the local legislation, we can talk about reviewing that language to be approximately rather than less than.
Yeah, that was my concern, is being so exact. We're not giving ourselves any flexibility. Beaufort is a vast area, and I know there are polling locations that may be located right on the border of, the boundary line. And you have to travel across the actual boundary lines of that precinct to get to the next one. It could be more than 5 miles. And so if we could give ourselves a little bit of wiggling room there, that would probably help.
I think less restrictive language would be to our advantage to such a manner. We have that flexibility.
Okay,
Maybe something like no more than to succeed a mile and a half or whatever, just as a buffer.
Variance.
so there's two separate parts here. One is the local legislation, which we don't have yet. We've sent 2 letters where we have requested it. We will send a third, and we can be more precise in the language that we want regarding the target 5 miles. The motion that I made was just related to this report, and we can adapt the title of that column to be within 5 miles or approximately 5 miles based on whatever's in the legal legislation. But for now, my recommendation, just to have this form, the form of this report complete, is to add the one column that says the distance of each precinct from the polling location. Is it in the precinct? Is it adjacent, immediately adjacent to the precinct? Or is it 2 or 3 precincts away? So that's one unit of measure. And the second column would be polling location less than 5 miles from the border of a precinct. And if I would rather say at the moment less than 5 miles. If the local legislation that we do get passed says approximately 5 miles, then we can just change the header of that column.
I'd say what we may present to the legislature would be congruent with what we're asking of them. So, I mean, if we have the opportunity right now to say approximately, why not give us that flexibility right now?
So what I'm hearing you say is that this is just for the form. We haven't considered what we're going to submit to the legislature at this point.
I would say we haven't reconsidered. We've
Right.
already submitted a letter that said 5 miles. We can reconsider that with the third request.
Is that the desire? I guess my concern is I want to make sure that because there's so many questions that are going on now, if we send a letter, the letter should be reflective of what we really want.
And
So I'm hoping that before we send the next letter, that staff will have an opportunity to do some investigation to make sure we're not putting ourselves in a situation that we're not gonna be able to comply with it. So I don't mind it being put on the form, because that's internal, but when it goes out, I think we need to make sure we have our ducks in a row, and that it's really what reflective of what we want. That's just my assessment. I have no problem with it going on the form because that's internal. But when we decide that we're gonna send something out, let's make sure that we have the answer before we send it out. And we agree with whatever the answer may possibly be. Because if it's on 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, I don't care at this point. But I want to make sure that when we made a request, that request is in compliance with what we really want. That's my only hope. And I guess that because just because 5 miles work in another county doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work in our county. And that's why I'm very concerned about putting a number out there until we have done some research on our own to make sure that it would work in Beaufort County. That's my only concern. So I don't have a problem with it being on this form because it's an internal form, but once we send a letter out to the legislature making a request, let's make sure we have the right answer before we make that request. That would be my only concern.
My concern is, why would we need to do double the work? Why don't we just wait and see and then have staff to go head on and implement it? Because other than that, we will put it on that form, and then we'll have to turn around and redo the form based on the information that we get from our legislators. It's just thinking about extra work. You know, I'm all about time management, managing that time to do that and then have to turn around and change it. That's just my thinking.
Well, the form is a draft form at this point, right? So why can't we include that in the form just for now, internally? But when we decide if we're gonna send a letter out, let's make sure that we have the answer we desire before we send a letter out, to make sure if 5 miles is it, 5 miles will be it. If it should be 6, it'll be 6. If it should be 7, it'll be 7. I just don't want to send a letter out without us doing the necessary research internally before we feel as if that's the appropriate letter to send. I realize we've done it already. I don't know if the research was done by staff. They can speak for themselves as to whether the 5 miles is the right number, or it should be 4, or it should be 3, or it should be 6, or it should be 7. I'd like for staff to do the work first, and then we can make a suggestion from a policy perspective afterwards. That's just my personal opinion.
So I agree with you, Mr. Ford. I think I would like to get the columns added to this form. For our internal approval as a board, we need to begin, since this board needs to approve all polling locations for every election anyway, it should be part of our standard process to have a table like this. Once the local legislation is put in place, we'll have to make that column, make sure that column is in sync with what's in the local legislation. And to your point, Mr. Ford, I expect that the delegation will have a meeting in July sometime. So I would appreciate it if the staff would do the work to make sure that the polling locations where precincts are pooled are within 5 miles or X miles of the border of the precinct that's voting at that location. So that research was done in 2024, and all of our pooled precincts were less than 5 miles from the border of the precinct voting there, but it would be best if the staff confirmed that. Yes, ma'am.
Is it appropriate also to just put approximately in there just for the leeway and
Problem is, we don't know what approximately is.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
It
that's-
could be 5.5 to one person and 5.1 to another, yes. So let's start with the 5. If it happens to be 5.1 and it's shown as being no, not within 5 miles, we can ask the question, say, well, it's 0.1 miles, and we'll just note that.
One of the, from my understanding from your motion, you're voting on this being an annual report.
Yes.
Could you consider the ADA side, because we're required to do that twice, every 2 years by the state, like that one, like if it's annual, we don't have a problem with the annual being the other things, but the ADA side of it every 2 years, could you consider that? And we also have other reports to do based on that ADA report.
Yeah, quite frankly, if we could make another change, I would recommend taking ADA out of this report. So this report is simply on polling locations for upcoming elections that the board approves. ADA is kept separate.
We could give you the ADA on that 2-year thing.
Sure.
With everything, okay.
Sure. Okay, so why don't I restate the motion?
I was just going to suggest that.
So I make a motion that we accept this form as a voting location approval form, excluding the ADA column, which will be handled in a separate report, and including 2 new columns. One states the distance from the polling location in counts of precincts. So is it adjacent, or is it 1 precinct away or 2 precincts away? And a second column that identifies whether or not the polling location is within 5 miles of the border of the precinct.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, we're on to new business. Okay, first item of new business I have is on Friday, May 20th, Ms. Smalls sent to all of us a letter about her plans to retire. Ms. Smalls' retirement will be effective August 1st, 2025, and that date will conclude 43 years of her dedicated service to the residents of Beaufort County. About half of that time was as staff and director of the Board of Voter Registration and Elections of Beaufort County. During Ms. Small's 20-plus years working with our board, she shepherded in drastic changes in voting technology for our quickly growing county. In the 2004 general election, so about 20 years ago,
We're dating people.
that's right, Beaufort County had 75 precincts with 76,000, about 77,000 registered voters. Today we have 134 precincts with 144,000 registered voters. So while the number of precincts, voters, and polling locations nearly doubled, and while the voting methods changed drastically, Ms. Smalls established and consistently maintained a culture of elections with integrity. That integrity and a culture of hard work and dedication will be the fine legacy that Marie will leave us with in August. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank Ms. Smalls and wish her the very best as she continues to serve her community outside the realm of government. It will be a community very fortunate to have her full attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll probably talk more about this next month. Okay, any comments on that topic before I go on to the next new item? No. Okay, so the operations manual, it calls for the appointment of a director selection ad hoc committee to oversee the process of soliciting applications and filling the director's position. To avoid having a quorum, our selection committee will have 4 members, and I have appointed the following members: Mr. Don Cooper, who will chair the committee, Mr. Ford, Ms. Johnson, and myself. The goal of this committee is to identify a short list of the most qualified candidates to fill this important role for the entire board to interview and make a selection. The operations manual also calls for the chair to request a meeting with the Beaufort County Administrator to communicate the board's planned actions regarding board selection of a successor director. Mr. Backer and I have spoken with Mr. Moore and Ms. Antonacci, and on June 13th, after getting the letter from Ms. Smalls, I had an additional discussion with Ms. Antonacci about our plans to put together a search committee. Finally, the operations manual calls for the chair to review any board recommended changes to the position description of the director. Since our board approved an updated description in April, and that description was used without revision in the posting, there's no further action required there. Any questions or comments? Okay. The last new business item I have is regarding the letter to Mr. Moore that the board approved and was sent to him on May 28th. This was the letter that described the turnout for early voting and where voters came from in response to his questions. And it also provided him with some information about the parking situation, specifically here and in Bluffton during early voting. From my discussion with Ms. Antonacci, that letter was being discussed in a staff meeting earlier this week, and we should expect to get some feedback and some further questions from Mr. Moore's staff. I don't suppose you've heard anything? No, nothing yet.
Not yet, anyway.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chair, when was that meeting? When did that meeting occur now?
That meeting, the staff meeting was to have occurred on Monday this week. Okay, does anybody have any questions about that new business or any other new business they'd like to raise?
So once we get a response back from Mr. Moore, then we'll know whether there's some action that the staff and facility committee need to take to follow up on it, since it's talking about the parking lot.
Yes, sir. I
Okay.
believe the feedback will go through Ms. Smalls and her team. And we, as the board chair, I should get some information about that feedback that's going to Ms. Smalls, just to help during this transition period, and since we as a board originated that letter. So I'm leaving it in Ms. Smalls' good hands at this point to follow up with Mr. Moore's office. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to the director's report.
Okay, good evening again, and thank you all for your well wishes. It's one of those things that I'm trying to join the new club that you all are already in. And so I see that you all are having fun, so I got jealous.
Be careful what you wish for. Take it from me.
No, I thought about that for a long time, and I think I've made the right decision. So, in reference to the board report today, we will not have any legislative updates because we don't have any. You know, the General Assembly is out of session until January of next year. There's nothing really going on the federal end of election laws right now. Everything is at a standstill. So we are going to just really jump right into elections update. Since we met last, we've had 2 new poll workers training sessions. The May 31st We had 18 people enroll and 17 people attended. On June 18th, which was this Wednesday, we had 24 people enrolled and 18 people attended. So right now, with all of the sessions we've had since March of this year, we have gained 120 new, eager, willing to work poll workers.
Marie,
Yes.
those folks who signed up to attend but did not attend, do we have any follow-up with them, or do we have a reason as to why?
Yeah, some of them had personal things to come up. Some of them have rescheduled from one session to another. Most of the time, if some emergency comes up that they are able to attend, and they try to reschedule themselves in another session. So on the next slide, Wendell, we have a breakdown of how many of those poll workers are living within the precincts that are operated by our board members, overseen by our board members, and it looks like we've bluffed, and Mr. Backer, you're doing much better. So there's hope. And Mr. Cooper, of course, is always doing good. But Ms. Johnson, you had a big jump, I believe, as well. So, you know, the poll workers are coming from all areas of the counties, and we are still asking you all to encourage people that you know to still go ahead and sign up. This is a good time to sign up where there's no pressure of an election coming soon. The November election is not going to be as stressful as what you're going to have in 2026. So now is a good time. Get our poll workers trained, at least exposed to the processes and procedures, and come election time, it won't be such of a hassle to find poll workers. So let's continue our effort in recruiting year-round.
Ms. Moles,
Yes.
are you mad because you said the legislature's meeting next week or next month?
There may be one next month, yes.
Do we have any indication as to when this vacant spot will be filled? Any idea at all?
They don't ever communicate that kind of information to us. It may be on the agenda when they convene, whenever that may be. So
I agree.
we would have to wait for the agenda. Now, is there anything that the board themselves would like to present to the legislator? I would suggest that we go ahead and contact Cindy so that we can get on the agenda if we need to do that. So they actually meet. So you want to have that on their table before they actually create their agenda. Not the appointment, but the information like we were just talking about.
Yes. Yeah, actually, I would like to get on their agenda to present our case again for local legislation as we'd requested in that July 2023 and the March 2025 letters.
Oh, so you want me to do that?
Yeah, please, if you could add that, and sorry, this probably should have been new business. If we do make a presentation to the delegation, we'll have to get board approval of that. And depending on when the meeting.
You might want to do that today. Because, like I said, you're not sure when they are going to meet in July, and we have an early meeting in July, remember, the 17th. So if it's during that time frame.
Could you have somebody print out a copy of that July 26, 2023 letter?
You think you could find it? Okay. You mean before we leave today? Okay. Chris?
Yes, ma'am.
Should we make a motion now that a presentation from our board be presented during the next legislative delegation meeting in July.
Sure.
I so move.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Will that meeting be locally or in Columbia?
We don't know, but I expect it would be local.
Can you repeat the motion, please?
I move that the Beaufort County Board of Voter Registration, the board make a presentation before the legislative delegation at the July meeting.
Maybe just the next legislative meeting, because you're not sure if it's going to be July.
Yeah, at the
or-
next.
At the next legislative delegation meeting.
And actually, may I amend that motion to say that the presentation will be in support of the topic that was in our July 26, 2023 letter to the delegation?
Presentation will be by our chair.
Regarding pooled polling locations.
Mr. Chair, do you want to restrict yourself to that? Because there may be additional items you may want to discuss at that meeting. Something may come up between now and then. So I'm not sure you want to limit yourself. I defer to you.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. All right, so let me amend my amendment.
Well, it didn't go through.
So the presentation to the delegation will be regarding pooled polling locations and any other topics that the
Deemed
board
appropriate.
deems appropriate. Yes.
Thank you.
That sounds good.
I second the motion
Okay.
as amended. I think someone else seconded it before.
Any other conversation? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank
I
you.
got one question, Marie. If, do we have any, I guess for Jean, do we have any sense of the 120 people that are taking the class, how many actually show up for the election?
There's really no way to know that because there are people that travel, then there's the emergencies that come up, there's the work requirements. Some prefer a smaller election, some only want to work the bigger election. So it's hard to gauge that, but they are all excited to work and have lots of questions. And they were all feverishly writing down when the mandatory briefings would be, because I tell them they're roughly a month before the election, because that's sometimes the issue. So traveling during the briefing. So they're all eager and ready to work. And as of right now, there's no foreseen obstacle that would keep any of them from working. You just never know up until it gets closer.
Close, okay. Do you have any sense, like, from history, like how many show up? It's a guess, around figure 80%?
I don't
90?
know, because
Okay.
when we send out the surveys and they tell us they can work, we don't intuitively know, oh, these people took the class in June of last year and now they're willing to work, or if they've been working forever and ever. We just,
I think it's pretty high, myself.
yeah. Oh, it's definitely higher.
Jean, do you have a flyer that we could send out?
We do
with the
have a
up-
flyer.
With the updated or the remaining dates of classes?
Yeah, we'll just have to take out the dates that have already passed and we can get that to you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
September is the last month for this year anyway.
There's 4 more. There's 4 more this year.
All righty, thank you. Facilities update. So far as the 2026 capital improvement projects, of course, what's being proposed in the budget right now is still not a final decision on whether or not they're all going to be. And what we have is the alarm system, the painting and carpeting of these floors, resurfacing the warehouse flooring, and security doors, secure doors. I think it's the steel doors. So all the other projects that were in 2025, we still really don't know when all of that's going to get done. Like we don't like to talk too much about what they are, but one of the things that we are still waiting on is the generator, and we know that's one of the big ticketed items. So I'm not sure exactly where we are with that. The last update was that it was out for bid. So,
And the due date at that time was June 30th for bid. So we'll see.
that was, this is county government.
I was wondering, where are we in terms of the windows to the offices?
That's the stuff we don't talk about in the public. Okay. Mr. Ford, I think, is soliciting a meeting in the month of July for his facility committees, and hopefully maybe before the next board meeting. Are you going to be around? I mean, not like that. I mean, like, are you going to be in town and not traveling for the summer? I don't want to visit you in heaven. But, so we'll get together on a good date and maybe come up with a meeting date so that he can present something to the board by the July meeting. If there anything to report, you know. Okay. All right, voting equipment. I think I mentioned in the last month report that there were some defects in the DS300s that we received right before the November elections. And there were some little cracks in the top or the hood of it. And all of those that were cracked were replaced. They replaced 88 of those defective tops. And along with that, they added 134 little bumpers. This is a little guard thing that goes across the front of the machine to help safeguard the latches that's on there. And so those were done just this past week. The bumpers were, the last of the bumpers were installed on the 17th, and the tops were done on the 10th of June.
Is that all warranty? Was that a warranty?
Yes, they're all under warranty. SCARE Mid-Year Conference is scheduled in Greenville, the 23rd through the 25th. 5 staff members will be attending, and I think it's 3 board members, or maybe now just 2, because I think we counted you and you're not going, right? Okay.
Fun. Ms. Mitchell
I'm
and
not gonna go.
So now it's just 1.
Who is that one?
Ali.
For now,
staff.
for now.
Myself, Wendell, Jean, Rosalind, and Vernon. And the only reason I'm going is because at the conference, I'm the chairperson of the Moore Awards Committee, and so I need to be there to present the award to the new recipient. And miscellaneous updates. We have completed the street files in our voter registration management system, the 8 new precincts. We've received that information from the Legislative Council. It was sent over to our GIS department. They have in turn produced the updated street files, and the street files were sent to us, and we have updated them in our system. And now we have requested what we call a redistricting from the state, SEC. What they will do is they will run that report and move all of those voters that needs to be moved into their new precincts. And once they have done that, we will go back, double check, triple check, and check again to make sure everyone's in their right homes. And we are also in the process of adding some additional polling locations in the Bluffton area. So we're going to try and see, once we get approval from those facilities, which will be a part of the July report as well, We will send out new voter registration cards for those folks along with the folks that are in the new precincts. And if we don't get new precincts for those folks that are moving, they will be in their current polling location.
Marie, for this redistricting update and the verification process, is that done manually by staff, or are we using AI to do it for us?
You're big time, federal government. It's being done manually. What happens? What happened is we have to make sure that all of our voters are in those precincts. We got to verify their district information, make sure that it's it's correct, and but that's done manually. It's been done before.
It's your
For
system
the
of check
record-
and balances.
Mr. Ford, there is more than one staff member going over the records. There's actually about 4 of them. And then is double checked by the director and Vernon also. So it's not just one person doing it.
Right, that was my question. How are we doing a check and balance system to make sure that all of the numbers are comparable?
Yeah, we do that.
Okay.
We have a system.
I just wanted to know what the system was.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things. Street updates are done on a daily basis. We get changes to our streets daily. The town of Bluffton's always bringing on new subdivisions. We've got, projects all over the county. And our GIS coordinates with all the GIS from the town and municipalities to make sure our streets are updated. So it's not like we just don't, we do this all the time. It's nothing new. So any other questions about that process? I know we were kind of concerned about notification to the voter, but we really do have time. We may not be sending that information out to them until August, just to make sure we can verify the new polling locations, get them online, and if we need to move voters into new polling locations, that will be done along with the new precincts.
Approximately, excuse me, approximately how many individuals you think is going to be affected by this process?
You mean the new 8 new precincts?
Yes.
We had a figure, Mr. Sweeney. Do you remember what it was?
It was roughly 5,000 people total.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Times 1,600.
Only half of those will be affected.
But
Only half of those will be affected.
so what we will do, that you will know what those are when we give our report next month, because by then everybody would have been moved, and you will know where they are, how many they were, and everything. So. Okay. Miscellaneous updates. This is my report, but I need to. Thought it was a part of the packet.
It is.
It is?
Yes, ma'am. Behind your board report.
I thought it wasn't. It wasn't okay. Oh, okay, okay. I slipped
maybe
right
there was-
past it.
No, I thought
I
maybe
said,
there was
Chris didn't
something
give out
extra.
my report. All right, the attachment A. These are the goals that we came up with when staff and I met. We tried to come up with things that we know needs attention, and we try to make things, we try to look to improve operations and comply with security needs. We want to comply with several different areas. So I didn't go into detail in the board report because you have a copy of it in that attachment. The areas that we looked at was facilities, information technology, voter education, community outreach, early voting, election preparation, voter registration, and election security, and poll workers management. These are the things that we are focusing on in 2026, 2025, 2026. And so if the board, once you review it, if you have any other ideas of things that you would like to add or include, please let us know, because what we are trying to do is stay ahead of the game and make sure that whatever we do, it's beneficial to the office and to the voters of Beaufort County. So, go ahead.
So, Marie, this historically, these goals and objectives for the department have been submitted together with the budget. After that submittal, typically, how are these goals and objectives used during the fiscal year? What's the purpose of them?
Well, I can say, I don't know why the county always asks for them, but I know we do them so that we can have a floor plan of what we need to do as a department. It will be submitted again. Matter of fact, it's overdue. So, but I have to limit it to 3 goals. I think I have, how many on here, 10? 7? 7 goals with some subsections. And so, as a part of the budget for 2026, I need to submit 3 goals to be, I guess, printed along with the budget narrative for this department. So the board can choose what 3 they want to submit, or I can choose what 3 needs to be submitted, but they did limit me to 3.
Well, it seems as department goals and objectives that are shared with the administrator's office, it seems like the goals should be focused on the goals that require interaction with other government departments. Many of them have work with county's facility management department or work with the county to find an alternate location for the satellite office, work with the capital improvement department for XYZ. I think this is a great way to communicate with the administrator's office about goals and objectives we have that require their support so that they can be reviewed during the year and see how we're doing against them. So as you choose the department goals and objectives to be submitted to the administrator's office with the budget, I would encourage you to include the items that require the assistance of other county departments. I think we as a board have discussed previously about the director's individual goals and objectives, which will be separate from these. So these are department goals and objectives that coincide with the financial year. According to our operations manual, the director's goals and objectives should be done with the calendar annual review, January through December. So those will be separate goals and objectives for the director. So just to restate, my recommendation is that as you prioritize goals and objectives to share with the administrator's office, you focus on those objectives that require support from other departments. You know what I mean? Because the director's individual
I got you.
objectives will be separate, and I assume that the goals and objectives that are prepared for each of your staff members will also be separate and encapsulate many of the strategic objectives that are in this draft, but they're not necessarily useful for the administrator's office with whom you're sharing this and presumably discussing as the year goes on.
I was just thinking about the education department at Beaufort County Schools and how we rely on them for facilities to conduct elections. So I'm thinking maybe one goal to.
We work with all
Is
of
that
those.
your line of thinking when you
It
were
is.
saying the interagency support?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what we do, because we are not, we don't have the manpower or the resources to deal with the physical aspect of some of the things that we need done. And so by default, we have to work along with county government agents, county agencies and inter-county governmental agencies to accomplish, like school system. You know, the library is a part of the county system, and so that's not a problem. But, and that's what we do. I mean, like I said, we can't do these things on our own. I can't just go to the store and buy a generator because I want one. You know, there are processes and procedure in place, so we have to coordinate and work with county government to get a lot of what we do done. So I understand. We're on the same page. Okay, so do we need to go over all of this, or are you comfortable with what you see as some of our goals and objectives for the fiscal year, or do you have other ideas that you would like to just throw out there to see if?
I don't think we need to go through this in detail. If anybody has a specific idea they might want to add to this, we're welcome to hear it. But I'd appreciate if you have to distill this down to 3 goals and objectives for the department, if you could do that and share it with the board members before you share it with the administrator's office.
Well, I'm already late. It was due
Okay.
last week. And I couldn't do it without you guys. So I would, if nothing else, if we could just, if you had a chance, you had it overnight, if you had a chance to look at it, is there something in particular? Because I need your approval before I make the submittal. And so I said last week, I think it was due.
Okay, so I'd like to
Wednesday.
see you distill this down to the 3 items you think are most appropriate, and we as a board will take a look at that.
Those facilities always, is always on the list there.
Information technology and 6.
Now, is there any reason we can't do that by email? If you distill this to the 3 goal categories that you'd like to submit, can you send that to us and we can provide email approval? If not, is it okay to get just the chair's approval?
Well, the board would have to say that, because, like I said, I don't think we can approve things by email. It has to be done in the public.
Can't do unanimous consent?
I'm sorry?
We can't do unanimous consent by,
I
Can you do a meeting by email? That's the question.
no, I would not recommend that. What I would recommend is that we can delay it. I don't know if they would accept it beyond the deadline and wait for the July meeting. I don't know when the book is going to be published. But
We have an executive session in a couple of minutes. Could you go through it and identify 3 and we approve it when we get back after the executive session?
that's a
Might-
possibility, if that's okay with the chair.
Sure.
We can approve it after we get back from executive session. That'll give Ms. Smalls time to go through it. If you're concerned with it being things that interact outside with the county government, I noticed right away two or 3 that stood out. Some of the things with the IT, like the website and things like that, that was an outside department. And then you have a couple things with the facilities
I think that's a good idea. We have executive session, perhaps during that time. If you've already drafted it, it'll be easier for you, but you come up with your recommended 3 topics.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Okay, then, that's it, I think, is it?
One more thing.
Okay. Oh, one more thing, the biggest thing of all. You guys are getting a pay raise in July. The legislators did pass that in the state budget, SEC's budget. So the board, effective July 1, will receive an increase in their stipend from $1,500 to $2,500.
Were there increases in the reimbursement for poll workers? Or is
No.
it just the board members?
Just the board members. Poll workers didn't get through.
Can
So,
we?
so that's something you all can talk to the legislators
That's what I
about
was
as
gonna
well.
suggest to you. That's what I was about to suggest. That's something I think we need to talk to our legislator about. I mean, I think the poll workers, I'll say this again, need to raise far more than us as commissioners.
Agreed.
Be careful with that because it may be, what's the term? Because of what we already have for our poll workers. You don't want it to be a, what do you call it, something mandated.
Whatever we have for our poll workers, they deserve it and more.
No, I totally agree with you. What I'm saying is, when you go to the legislators, don't have it money that has to come in versus money coming from where we already have it coming from.
Unfunded mandates?
Yeah, unfunded mandate, yeah.
They may mandate it, but make the county pay them additional monies, is what he's trying to say. And, you know, I think you just need to be specific.
As long as the poll workers get paid more, I'm not particular about who pays them, as long as they get paid more. Whether it's the state or the county, they deserve more, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, like for instance, she was saying, the county is doing much more. We're probably one of the better ones, so you need to make sure that the state, if legislators make sure they get it from them, not the county.
Again, it doesn't matter to me where the money comes from. It's still my money as a taxpayer. I just think the poll workers deserve more money. If it comes from the county, it comes from the county. If it comes from the state, it comes from the state.
So I think if we have a meeting with the delegation, we should state our support for a bill that's already been introduced to increase poll worker pay statewide. We won't address the addition that Beaufort County is already providing supplement.
I agree with that approach, because we don't want to sound like we want to shift what has already been approved.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Okay, well, that ends my report.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to move into executive session?
I so move.
Second?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll move into executive session where we will not take any votes. Discuss a personnel issue. Thank you. Call the meeting back to order. It's now 4:03. We've come out of executive session where there were no votes taken. Okay, so let's revisit the topic of objectives. So Ms. Smalls, you prepared a proposed three-point document for submittal with the budget. Let's take a look at this. Did everyone have a chance to read the 3 points on this goals and objectives document? Any comments or questions? I have a question in number 1, Marie. You mentioned the parking plan for Beaufort. What about the Bluffton Rec Center? Or is it assumed that it will be paved and taken care of?
Yeah, I think that's already on their agenda. I mean, it's their facility. So, yeah, I think that's already a done deal. Now, unless the board is thinking about something more detailed than what the county has already proposed. And that's being handled by the recreation department.
They told us they are paving all of that. They were specific, that's what, I don't forget how it ever came up, but they point blank said, oh, we're paving all of that. So that kind of just, something we have to worry about.
Just to give you a date as to
No,
when.
they give us a date or anything like that.
Okay. Motion to accept these department goals and objectives?
I just have a question on
Sure.
information technology. Is the SEC a potential resource for support with website development?
That's the Beaufort counties.
No?
I mean, they can give us
We just
some
link,
pointers,
we
but
just link to stuff on their
our
website.
guys are some of the best.
Our website doesn't reflect that.
Well, you're talking about our current, right? We build
Yeah.
our current website, but we are going to consult with the IT department that manages the whole county, all of the county websites. And we link all of our, I guess, findings to the state website. So,
Okay.
I mean, if you're talking about them coming down and telling our county how to do it, that's not going to happen.
Okay.
Okay, so.
I move that we adopt the goals and objectives for the Voter Registration and Elections Commission of Beaufort County for fiscal year 2025-26.
Second.
Second.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then the discussion that we had earlier about presentation to the delegation. I do hope the delegation will have a meeting toward the end. I don't have any information that says that they will, but I'm hoping they do it. Number one, I hope it's after our July 17th board meeting so that at the board meeting we can approve the presentation. But based on today's discussion, our presentation to the delegation will include 3 parts. The first part is a renewed request for local legislation like the Richland legislation to allow co-located polling locations. And I think that the request should stick with the 5 miles. that we had in the original request and is in the precedent Richland article. If the staff has researched, and I would like the staff to double check that all of the co-located polling locations are within 5 miles of the precinct borders. If the staff comes back and says, oh, we've got one that's 8 miles, we can revisit the 5, but for now, let's assume that it is 5. So the first topic is the co-located polling locations and getting local legislation to approve that. The second topic would be statement of support for the bill that's already been submitted to increase poll worker pay. And the third topic would be regarding funding of voting equipment. So we have added 8 new precincts, and our presentation should request the delegation to make funds available to add voting equipment for those 8 precincts.
Thank you for taking that to the legislators, because the State Election Commission already said that they will not.
Okay, so may I have a motion to approve those 3 topics?
I move, excuse me, I move that we accept the proposed topics for the presentation to the legislative delegation.
I second.
Any comments? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay, good. Okay, next board meeting is scheduled for July 17, 2 o'clock, still in this office. And does anybody else have any closing comments?
Great meeting.
Okay. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.